Queen sat alone on her throne, her pale fingers resting on the cold armrests as she listened to the whispers of her council. She could not see them, but she knew exactly where each one stood. She had memorized the sound of their footsteps, the rhythm of their breathing, and the subtle shifts in their voices when they lied. Being blind among them was considered the greatest shame, for her people communicated through patterns of light that danced across their skin. Had never seen these lights. She had never seen anything at all. The council members spoke in hushed tones about the coming war. The Empire had already destroyed 3 colonies, and their fleet was moving closer to the home world each day. The military was strong, but not strong enough to fight alone. They needed allies, and the only species willing to help was humanity. Humans were strange creatures from a planet called Earth. The galaxy considered them primitives who had somehow survived on a world that should have killed them. Their planet had extreme temperatures, deadly predators, and countless diseases. Yet humans had not only survived but thrived. They had spread across the stars in just a few centuries, building colonies and making alliances with dozens of species. Some called them cockroaches, others called them miracles. Most simply called them unpredictable. High Counselor stepped forward and cleared his throat. He was old and cunning, and knew he had been trying to remove her from the throne for years. Her blindness made her an easy target, but she had outmaneuvered him at every turn through intelligence and careful planning. "My queen," said, his voice dripping with false respect, "the human delegation has arrived. They have proposed terms for an alliance." Tilted her head slightly. "What terms?" "They wish for a permanent bond between our species, a marriage alliance. They have offered one of their diplomats as a candidate." The council chamber fell silent. Marriage among them was a sacred bond, usually arranged between powerful families to secure political strength. The idea of marrying a human was almost unthinkable. Humans were so different from them. They had no bioluminescence, no telepathic sensitivity, and no grace. They were loud and emotional and strange. "A marriage," repeated slowly, "to a human." "Yes, my queen. The humans believe it will strengthen our alliance and show the galaxy that our species stand together against the threat." Considered this carefully. She knew what the council was thinking. They expected her to refuse. A blind queen marrying a primitive human would be the ultimate humiliation, the final proof that she was unfit to rule, but had not survived 20 years on the throne by being predictable. "I will meet this human," she said. The council gasped in surprise but ignored them. She rose from her throne and walked slowly down the steps, counting each one as she had done 1,000 times before. A servant rushed to guide her, but she waved them away. She would not show weakness in front of her enemies. The human delegation waited in the reception hall, could hear their heavy footsteps and smell their strange scent, like rain and metal, and something warm she could not identify. There were 5 of them, but one stood slightly ahead of the others. His breathing was calm and steady, unlike the nervous patterns of his companions. "Queen," a deep voice said, "I am Blake, ambassador from the Human Confederation. Thank you for receiving us." His voice was different from what she had expected. It was soft and respectful, without the arrogance she had heard from other alien diplomats. She turned her head toward the sound, her sightless eyes looking past him into nothing. "Ambassador Blake," she replied, "I understand your people wish for a marriage alliance." "Yes, Your Majesty. We believe it would benefit both our species greatly." "And you are the proposed candidate." There was a slight pause before he answered. "I am, if you find me acceptable." Almost smiled at his honesty. Most diplomats would have hidden behind political language, but this human spoke directly. She appreciated that. "Tell me about yourself, Ambassador Blake." "I was a teacher before I became a diplomat," said. "I taught young humans about history and literature. When the war began, I volunteered for the diplomatic corps because I believed that understanding between species was more important than fighting." "A teacher," said thoughtfully, "not a soldier or a politician." "No, your majesty. I have never fired a weapon in my life." The council members behind whispered angrily. They had expected the humans to send a warrior or a great leader, not a simple teacher. This was an insult, but heard something in his voice that interested her. There was no deception, no hidden agenda. He was exactly what he claimed to be. "Very well," she said. "I accept the proposal." The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members shouted in protest, demanding that she reconsider. The human delegation seemed equally surprised by her quick decision, but raised her hand and silence fell. "The alliance will be sealed through marriage," she announced. "The ceremony will take place in 3 days." The wedding was a grand affair, though experienced none of its visual splendor. She heard the music, felt the silk of her gown, and smelled the flowers that filled the cathedral. Stood beside her, his hand warm as it held hers during the vows. He spoke the traditional words carefully, having obviously practiced them many times. When the ceremony ended, the guests departed and the servants found herself alone with her new husband in the royal chambers. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the climate controls and steady breathing. She expected him to leave, to find his own quarters and maintain a polite distance as political marriages usually demanded. Instead, he stayed. She heard him move closer, not touching her, just standing nearby. "Your Majesty," he said gently, "is there anything you need?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in a very long time. As queen, she gave orders and others obeyed. No one considered what she might need or want. "I am fine," she said automatically. "The ceremony was very long," continued. "You must be tired. Would you like to sit down?" Hesitated. She knew every inch of her regular chambers, but these were different rooms, arranged for the newly married royal couple. She did not know where the furniture was placed. She did not know how many steps it would take to reach the bed or the chairs. In this unfamiliar space, she was truly helpless. She hated that feeling more than anything else in the galaxy. And now this human, this stranger, was witnessing her vulnerability on what should have been a night of political triumph. "I can manage," she said coldly. But she did not move and seemed to understand why. He did not laugh or pity her. He simply waited as if he had all the time in the world. That night in the darkness that was the same for her as any other moment, began to wonder if she had made the right decision. She had married a human to save her empire. What she did not know yet was that this quiet teacher from Earth would soon change everything she believed about strength, weakness, and what it truly meant to see. The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Stood in the center of the unfamiliar room, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She could feel watching her, though she could not see his expression. Most would have been broadcasting their emotions through bioluminescent patterns, colors shifting across their skin to show impatience or disgust or pity. But humans had no such lights. They were dark creatures, impossible to read without sight. "May I ask you something?" said finally. "You may ask, I may not answer." "How do you usually navigate new spaces? Do you have a system, or does someone help you?" Stiffened at the question. Among her people, discussing her blindness was considered deeply inappropriate. It was a flaw to be hidden, not examined. But asked the question simply, as if he were inquiring about her favorite color or her morning routine. "I memorize," she said reluctantly. "I count steps and listen for echoes. I learn the shape of a room through repetition." "That sounds exhausting." "It is necessary." Was quiet for a moment. Then she heard him move, his footsteps crossing the room. She tracked his position by sound, nodding when he stopped near what she assumed was a window. "These chambers are beautiful," he said. "There are 2 large windows facing east. Outside I can see the palace gardens and beyond them, the silver ocean. There are 2 moons in the sky right now, one large and pale blue, the other smaller and almost white. The light from them makes the water look like liquid metal." Frowned in confusion. "Why are you telling me this?" Because you cannot see it, and I thought you might want to know. She did not know how to respond. No one had ever described a view to her before. No one had thought she would want or need such information. Visual beauty was for the sighted. She was expected to be content with sounds and textures and nothing more. The room itself is arranged in a circle, continued. The bed is to your right, about 15 steps from where you are standing. There are 3 chairs near the windows, arranged around a small table. To your left there is a bathing chamber 7 steps away. The door we entered through is directly behind you. Listened carefully, building a mental map as he spoke. 15 steps to the bed, 7 to the bathing chamber, 3 chairs by the windows. The floor is smooth stone, added, but there is a rug in the center about 4 steps in diameter. The edges are raised slightly so you can feel where it begins and ends. You are very observant, said slowly. I was a teacher. Observation was part of my job. He paused. I noticed that there are no accommodations for you in this room. No textured markers on the walls, no audio guides, nothing to help you move independently. Is it the same everywhere in the palace? What do you mean by accommodations? On Earth, we have systems to help people who cannot see, raised patterns on floors to show pathways, audio announcements in public spaces, books that can be read by touch instead of sight, signs that speak when you approach them. Shook her head slowly. They have no such things. Blindness is rare among my people, and those who have it are usually kept hidden away. I am the only blind person in a position of public importance, and that is only because I was born to the royal bloodline. So you have ruled an entire empire without any help navigating the physical world. I have servants who guide me when necessary, but yes, I have learned to manage alone. Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was strange, tight with an emotion she could not identify. That is incredible, he said, and also completely unacceptable. Unacceptable. Your people have technology that can bend light and communicate across galaxies, but they cannot create a simple system to help their queen walk through her own palace without counting steps. That is not a limitation of technology. That is a choice. They chose not to help you. Had never thought of it that way. She had always accepted her situation as the natural consequence of her blindness. She was broken, so she had to work harder than everyone else. That was simply how things were. Among humans, said, we believe that everyone deserves to live independently. If someone cannot see, we create tools to help them. If someone cannot walk, we build chairs that move for them. We do not expect people to simply suffer because they are different. That seems inefficient, said, though her voice lacked conviction. Perhaps, but we believe that every person has value regardless of their abilities. Helping them is not a burden. It is basic decency. He walked toward her, his footsteps careful and deliberate. When he stopped, he was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Humans ran hotter than she remembered. Their home world was harsh, and their bodies had adapted to survive extreme conditions. May I take your hand? He asked. Hesitated, then nodded. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and gentle. His skin was rougher than us, but his touch was surprisingly soft. I am going to walk you through the room, he said. Tell me if I go too fast or if you want me to stop. Slowly led her around the chamber. He described each piece of furniture as they approached it, letting her touch the surfaces and memorize their positions. He pointed out potential hazards like a low table she might bump into or a step leading down to the bathing area. He showed her where the door controls were located and how the light panels worked, even though she could not use them. The wardrobe is here, he said, guiding her hand to a smooth panel. If you press this button, it opens. Your clothes are arranged by color on the left and by occasion on the right, but I can rearrange them however you prefer. Perhaps by texture, so you can find what you need by touch. Pulled her hand back sharply. Why are you doing this? Doing what? All of this, describing the room, offering to rearrange my clothing. You gain nothing from helping me. Was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed, a soft sound that carried more meaning than words. On Earth, he said, I grew up next door to a girl named Lucy. She was blind from birth like you. When we were children, I used to describe the world to her. I told her about sunsets and snowflakes and the way light moved through autumn leaves. She said my descriptions helped her feel less alone. What happened to her? She became a scientist. She developed new technologies to help blind people navigate cities. Last I heard, she was working on a system that translates visual information into sound patterns. He paused. She once told me that the hardest part of being blind was not the darkness. It was the way sighted people treated her as if she did not deserve to experience the world. Felt something shift inside her chest, an unfamiliar sensation like a knot loosening. This human, this strange creature from a violent death world, was treating her with more kindness than her own people ever had. You are not what I expected, she admitted. Neither are you, replied. I expected a cold politician. Instead, I found someone who has survived incredible hardship with no support at all. That takes strength I cannot even imagine. For the first time in many years, felt her eyes grow wet with tears she could not see. She turned away quickly, hiding her face even though she knew he would not judge her for showing emotion. It is late, she said. We should rest. Of course, released her hand and stepped back. The bed is 15 steps to your right, as I said. I will take one of the chairs by the window. You do not wish to share the bed. Not unless you want me to. This marriage may be political, but that does not mean I have any claim to your personal space. You are the queen. You decide what happens in your own chambers. Stood motionless for a long moment, processing his words. Then, slowly, she walked the 15 steps to the bed and sat down on its edge. The sheets were soft and cool beneath her fingers. Good night, she said quietly. Good night. She lay down and closed her eyes, though it made no difference to her vision. As she drifted toward sleep, she thought about moons over silver oceans, about colors she had never seen, and about a human who had shown her more kindness in one evening than she had received in her entire life. Something had changed between them. She was not sure what it meant yet, but for the first time in decades, she felt something that might have been hope. The days following the wedding changed everything thought she knew about humans. Woke early each morning and spent hours exploring the palace, memorizing its layout with the precision of a military strategist. But he was not planning an attack or looking for weaknesses. He was creating a map for her. By the end of the first week, he had placed small textured markers on the walls of the most important corridors. Each marker had a different pattern that could identify by touch. 3 raised bumps meant she was approaching the throne room. A wavy line indicated the path to the council chambers. A smooth circle marked the entrance to the royal gardens. How did you make these? Asked, running her fingers over a marker near her private study. I asked your craftsmen for help. They were confused at first. They did not understand why anyone would need such things. His voice carried a hint of frustration, but they made them when I explained it was for you. They never thought to create anything like this before. No, they did not. Had ruled the empire for 20 years, navigating the palace through memorization and the reluctant assistance of servants who clearly considered helping her beneath their dignity. Now, for the first time, she could walk alone through the corridors without counting steps or listening for familiar sounds. The markers guided her like stars guiding a ship through darkness. But did not stop with the markers. He began teaching her something he called Braille, a human system of raised dots that represented letters. The alphabet was different from the human one but worked with linguists to adapt the system. Within 2 weeks, could read short messages by touch. This is remarkable, she said one afternoon, her fingers moving across a practice sheet. Words I can feel instead of see. Humans developed this centuries ago, explained. A young man named Louis created it when he was only 15. He was blind himself, and he wanted to read like everyone else. A child invented this. Yes, he refused to accept that blindness meant he could not learn, so he created his own solution. Thought about her own childhood, spent in isolation while tutors tried to teach her through verbal instruction alone. She had worked 3 times as hard as sighted children just to keep up. No one had ever suggested that there might be an easier way. "Your species is strange," she said finally. "How so?" "You refuse to accept limitations. Other species see a problem and work around it. Humans see a problem and try to destroy it." Laughed a warm sound that had grown to appreciate. "That is one way to describe us. We call it stubbornness." As the weeks passed, his presence began to change more than just his ability to navigate the palace. He attended council meetings with her, sitting quietly beside her throne while advisors discussed trade agreements and military movements. At first, the council ignored him, treating him as nothing more than a political decoration, but was observing everything. High Counselor was lying during today's meeting, he told one evening in their chambers. "How do you know?" His breathing changed when he discussed the Treasury reports. He swallowed twice before answering your question about military spending, and he kept shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Sat very still. "You noticed all of that?" Humans communicate through body language as much as words. We learn to read these signals from childhood. I have been watching your council members nodding their patterns. Is definitely hiding something. So is the trade minister, though I am not sure what yet. This information was invaluable. For years, had relied on the tone of voices and the careful choice of words to detect deception. But many of her enemies had learned to control their speech. They could not control the unconscious movements of their bodies. "You are giving me eyes," said slowly. "I am giving you information. What you do with it is your choice." She began asking to describe every council meeting in detail. Not just what was said, but how people stood, where they looked, what their hands were doing. She learned that Lord always touched his collar when he was nervous. She discovered that the military commander blinked rapidly when discussing certain fleet positions. She realized that 2 of her most trusted advisors exchanged glances whenever she proposed reforms they opposed. With this new information, became even more effective as a ruler. She exposed some embezzlement scheme using evidence she had gathered based on observations. She identified 3 spies in her court by noting their suspicious behaviors during sensitive discussions. She negotiated better trade deals by reading the body language of foreign ambassadors through her husband's descriptions. The court began to whisper, but the whispers were different now. They spoke of the Queen's mysterious new abilities, her uncanny knowledge of secrets she should not possess. Some suspected dark magic. Others believed she had developed some new power. None of them guessed the truth. None of them imagined that a simple human teacher was giving their blind queen the gift of sight in ways they could not comprehend. One afternoon, sat in the royal gardens with beside her. The air smelled of flowering vines and salt from the distant ocean. Birds sang in the trees above, their calls mixing with the gentle splash of fountains. "Describe it to me," she said. Took her hand as he often did now when they were alone. His touch no longer surprised her. It had become familiar, even comforting. "The garden is arranged in 3 tiers," he began. "We are on the middle tier, surrounded by blue and purple flowers. The blooms are shaped like bells and they sway in the wind. Above us, there is a canopy of trees with silver leaves that catch the sunlight. Below, I can see a reflecting pool where small creatures swim beneath lily pads." Listened with her eyes closed, building the image in her mind. She had walked through this garden thousands of times, but she had never truly experienced it until now. The sky today is pale green, with thin white clouds stretching toward the horizon. The larger moon is rising in the east, even though it is still afternoon. It looks almost transparent against the sky, like a ghost waiting for nightfall. You make it sound beautiful. It is beautiful, but I think you already knew that even without seeing it. Turned toward him, though she could not see his face. What do you mean? You experience the world differently than sighted people, but that does not mean your experience is lesser. You hear the birds more clearly than I do. You can identify flowers by their scent from across the garden. You feel the texture of the stone paths beneath your feet. These are things I barely notice. But I cannot see the moons or the colors or the light. No, but perhaps that means you see other things more clearly. Things that sighted people miss because they are too distracted by surfaces. Considered his words carefully. Her entire life she had thought of her blindness as a loss, something stolen from her before she was born, but spoke of it differently. He spoke of it as a different way of perceiving the world, not a worse one. The council believes you are making me dependent on you, she said quietly. They think you are manipulating me through kindness. What do you believe? I believe you are the first person who has ever tried to make me independent instead of keeping me helpless. She squeezed his hand. I believe you are a very strange human, Blake. I have been called worse. She smiled, something she rarely did in public. In the garden, with the sound of fountains and birdsong surrounding them, she felt something she had not felt in decades. Peace. The War Council meets tomorrow, she said. They have destroyed another colony. My generals want to launch a counterattack. What do you want? I want to end this war without losing more of my people, but I do not know if that is possible. Was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. On Earth, we have a saying, the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them your friend. They will never be our friends. Perhaps not, but perhaps they have enemies who could become your allies. Perhaps there are divisions within their empire that could be exploited. Perhaps there are options no one has considered because they have been too focused on fighting. Nodded slowly. This was why she valued perspective. He saw possibilities where others saw only obstacles. He asked questions that no one else thought to ask. Will you attend the War Council with me tomorrow? If you want me there. I do, she stood, still holding his hand. I want you beside me, not because you are my husband, but because you help me see clearly, and I think I will need that clarity more than ever in the days ahead. Together, they walked back toward the palace, following the textured markers that had created. Behind them, the twin moons rose higher in the green sky, casting silver light across a garden that would never see but now understood more deeply than ever before. The War Council chamber was filled with tension thick enough to taste. Sat at the head of the long table, beside her in a chair that had been added specifically for him. Around them, generals and admirals argued about fleet positions and attack strategies, their voices rising and falling like waves crashing against rocks. Admiral slammed his fist on the table. We must strike now before the fleet regroups. Our forces are ready. Every day we delay gives them time to strengthen their defenses. And every day we attack costs us ships and soldiers we cannot replace, General countered. They outnumber us 3-1. A direct assault would be suicide. Listened to both sides, her fingers tracing the edge of the table, leaned close and whispered descriptions of the room. Admiral was red with anger, his bioluminescent patterns flashing aggressive orange. General looked exhausted, her skin pale and her patterns dim. The other council members were divided, some nodding along with, others exchanging worried glances. What of our allies? Asked, cutting through the argument. The humans promised military support. The room fell silent, eyes turned toward, some curious, others hostile. The Human Confederation has sent a defensive fleet to protect your core worlds, said calmly. We are not equipped for offensive operations in space. Our ships are designed for different conditions. Then what good are you? Admiral demanded. "We married our queen to a human for military support, and all we receive is words." Felt tense beside her, but his voice remained steady. "You receive protection for your civilians while your military focuses on the enemy. You receive intelligence from our scout ships, and you receive new perspectives that your own strategists might have overlooked." "Perspectives," scoffed. "We need weapons, not perspectives." Admiral said coldly, "You will speak respectfully to my husband, or you will leave this chamber." His patterns shifted to a resentful purple, but he bowed his head. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." The meeting continued for another hour, but no agreement was reached. The military was divided between those who wanted immediate action and those who counseled patience, dismissed the council, and remained in the chamber with as the others filed out. "They do not trust me," said when they were alone. "They do not trust anyone. That is how they have survived. But they especially do not trust me, because I am human and because I have your ear." Reached out and found his hand. "Let them distrust. I know what you have done for me. I know your value." That evening, in the privacy of their chambers, asked the question that had been forming in her mind for weeks. "Why do you help me, truly? And do not tell me it is basic decency. There must be something more." Was quiet for a long moment. She heard him move to the window, his footsteps heavy with thought. "When I was young," he said finally, "my father became sick. A disease attacked his nervous system, slowly stealing his ability to move. By the end, he could not walk, could not feed himself, could not even turn his head without help. I am sorry." The world treated him as if he had stopped existing. People who had admired him before suddenly could not look at him. They spoke about him as if he were not in the room. They assumed that because his body had failed, his mind had failed too. Listened in silence, feeling the weight of his words. "I was only 12, but I swore that I would never treat anyone that way. I would never assume that a person's limitations defined their worth. My father was the same brilliant, loving man he had always been, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed him. The people who abandoned him were the ones who had truly lost something." "Is that why you became a teacher?" "Partly. I wanted to help young people understand that every person has value. Every person deserves respect and support, not because they earn it, but simply because they exist." Stood and walked toward the window, her steps sure thanks to the mental map she had built over the past months. She stopped beside, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. "Your father taught you something precious. He taught me that strength is not about power. It is about how we treat those who have less power than we do. And you believe helping me is strength. I believe helping you is right. The universe is full of species that have forgotten how to be kind. Humans have not forgotten. It is perhaps the only thing we do well." Turned toward him, her sightless eyes somehow finding his face in the darkness of her perception. "I have discovered something about humans," she said softly, "something that frightens me." "What is it?" "You make others stronger. Every species in the galaxy treats allies as tools to be used and discarded. But humans invest in their allies. You teach them, support them, lift them up. You gave me markers for the corridors and braille for reading and your eyes for council meetings. You have made me more powerful than I have ever been." "That frightens you." "It frightens me because I understand why other species fear humanity. Not because of your weapons or your death world biology, but because everywhere you go, you make friends stronger. You create allies who are loyal not from fear but from gratitude. You build networks of connection that span the galaxy." Was silent for a moment, then he laughed softly. "I never thought of it that way. The conquer through force, the survive through cunning, but humans you spread through kindness, and kindness, true kindness, is almost impossible to fight against." She reached up and touched his face, something she had never done before. Her fingers traced the strange contours of his features, so different from bone structure. His skin was warm and slightly rough. She felt the curve of his cheekbones, the line of his jaw, the softness of his lips. "I cannot see you," she whispered, "but I know you better than anyone I have ever known. I spent my entire life being told that I was broken, that my blindness made me less than others. My own people treated me with pity at best, contempt at worst. But you looked at me and saw someone worthy of help, someone worthy of investment, someone worth making stronger. Because that is what I see. That night, our wedding night, when you described the room to me and showed me where everything was, I discovered something. I discovered that humans do not see disability the way other species do. You see it as a problem to be solved, not a shame to be hidden. And that discovery changed everything I believed about myself." Took her hand and pressed it against his chest, over his heart. She felt the steady rhythm beneath her palm, so different from the triple beat of a heart. "I did not mean to change you," he said. "But you did, and I am grateful." They stood together by the window, two species separated by evolution and thousands of light years, connected by something neither of them had expected to find. Outside, the war continued. The fleet grew closer. The council plotted and schemed, but in that moment none of it mattered. "The council wants to separate us," said quietly. "Has been whispering that you have too much influence over me. He wants to send you back to Earth." "What do you want?" "I want you to stay. Not because of the alliance or the war or politics. I want you to stay because you are the first person who has ever made me feel whole." Leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers, a human gesture of intimacy she had learned from his descriptions. "Then I will stay, for as long as you want me." Smiled in the darkness that was all she had ever known, but somehow, with beside her, the darkness felt less empty than before. It felt almost like coming home. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Within months, the story of the blind queen and her human husband had spread to 100 worlds. Some dismissed it as propaganda, a political story designed to strengthen the human alliance. But others listened more carefully, noticing details that could not be invented. Ambassadors from distant species began requesting meetings with the court. They wanted to see for themselves this strange marriage that everyone was discussing. What they found surprised them. Queen moved through her palace with confidence, her fingers brushing the textured markers that lined the walls. She read reports in Braille, her hands flying across the raised dots faster than most sighted people could read printed text. She attended council meetings where she seemed to know exactly what everyone was thinking, identifying liars and schemers with uncanny accuracy. And always beside her was the human, Blake, not leading her like a pet on a leash, as some had expected, not controlling her like a puppet master pulling strings, simply walking with her, talking with her, treating her as an equal partner in ways that many species had never witnessed between a ruler and a consort. The delegation was the first to ask questions. "How do you navigate so easily?" Ambassador asked during a formal dinner. "We were told you could not see." "I cannot," confirmed. "But my husband created systems to help me move independently. Markers I can feel, documents I can read by touch, descriptions of everything I need to understand." And he did this freely, without demanding payment or political favors. Spoke from beside her. "On Earth, we call this accessibility. We believe that everyone deserves the tools they need to live fully, regardless of their abilities. It is not a transaction. It is a basic principle of human society." Exchanged glances with his colleagues. They had their own disabled citizens, hidden away in facilities and rarely spoken of. The idea that such people could be supported instead of ignored was foreign to them. Over the following months, similar conversations happened with dozens of delegations. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive death began to reconsider. They sent observers to human colonies and discovered something unexpected. Everywhere humans went, they built accommodations for others. ramps for species that could not climb stairs, translation devices for those who communicated through sounds humans could not hear, climate-controlled sections for visitors from extreme environments. Humans did not simply tolerate diversity. They prepared for it, welcomed it, invested in it. The War Council received intelligence reports about this phenomenon and dismissed them as irrelevant. What did it matter if humans built ramps and taught Braille? Military strength was what won wars, not kindness. But strength took many forms, as they would soon learn. High Counselor finally made his move on a cold winter morning. He had gathered support from a faction of nobles who resented the humans' growing influence. They confronted in the throne room, demanding that she send away or face a vote of no confidence. "The people have lost faith in your leadership," declared, his bioluminescent patterns flashing triumphant gold. "You have allowed this human to corrupt our traditions. You have become his puppet, dependent on his eyes and his tricks." Sat perfectly still on her throne, stood beside her as always, his hand resting lightly on the armrest. "I see," said calmly, "and if I refuse to send him away, then the council will be forced to consider alternative leadership for the empire." The nobles behind murmured in agreement. They had calculated their numbers carefully. They believed they had enough votes to win. "May I speak?" asked quietly. Laughed. "The human wishes to defend himself. How touching. Speak then, primitive. Let us hear your words before we send you back to your death world." Stepped forward, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried to every corner of the room. "I have been accused of corrupting your queen, of making her dependent on me. Let me show you what I have actually done." He gestured toward, who rose from her throne with fluid grace. "When I arrived, your queen had no way to navigate her own palace without servants guiding her every step. Now she can walk anywhere she chooses, independently, using markers she reads by touch." Walked across the throne room, her fingers brushing the wall markers as she moved. She walked without hesitation, without uncertainty, her path sure and confident. "When I arrived, your queen had no way to read documents. She relied entirely on others to tell her what reports contained. Now she reads everything herself, in a tactile language I adapted for her use." Picked up a document from a nearby table and ran her fingers across the Braille text. "This is High Counselor's financial report from last month," she said, "which he claimed showed a surplus but actually reveals a deficit of 30 million credits that he has hidden in false accounts." The chamber erupted in chaos. Patterns flashed from gold to panicked white. The nobles behind him stepped away, suddenly uncertain of their alliance. "When I arrived," continued, raising his voice above the noise, "your queen was isolated, dependent on advisors who often lied to her. Now she can read body language through my descriptions. She knows who is loyal and who is plotting against her." He turned to face the nobles directly. "Lord, you shifted your weight 4 times while was speaking, and your patterns dimmed whenever he mentioned the vote. You have doubts about this plan. Lady, you have not looked at once since he began. You joined this faction because he threatened your family, not because you believe in his cause." The nobles stared at in shock. He had read them all, exposed their secrets with observations they had not known anyone was making. "I did not make your queen dependent," said quietly. "I made her more independent than she has ever been. I made her stronger. That is what humans do. We make our allies stronger." The vote of no confidence collapsed. Was arrested for embezzlement that night. The nobles who had supported him quickly pledged their loyalty too, terrified of what other secrets the human might have uncovered. 2 months later, addressed the Galactic Assembly. Representatives from 300 species filled the vast chamber, their attention focused on the blind queen standing at the central podium with her human husband beside her. "I have ruled the empire for 20 years, began. For most of that time, I believed that my blindness was a weakness, a flaw that I had to hide and overcome through sheer willpower. My own people saw me as broken, as less than whole. She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. Then I married a human, and I discovered something that changed everything I believed about strength and weakness, about what it means to truly see. Her hand found, and she held it tightly. Humans are not dangerous because of their weapons or their survival instincts. They are dangerous because they make others stronger. Everywhere they go, they build bridges. They create accommodations. They invest in their allies instead of using and discarding them. They see potential where others see only limitation. My husband gave me tools to navigate my world independently. He gave me a language I could read by touch. He gave me his eyes to see the truth in council meetings and negotiations. He did not do this for political gain or military advantage. He did it because humans believe that every person deserves support, regardless of their abilities. Turned her sightless eyes toward the assembly, and somehow every representative felt as if she was looking directly at them. Any species that underestimates human compassion does so at their own peril, because compassion is not weakness. It is the greatest strength in the galaxy. It creates loyalty that cannot be bought. It builds alliances that cannot be broken. It transforms enemies into friends and weakness into power. She smiled, a rare expression that transformed her face. I am blind. I have never seen a sunrise or a flower or the face of the man I love. But because of a human teacher from Earth, I see more clearly now than I ever have before. And what I see is a future where kindness conquers fear, where support defeats isolation, and where every species in this galaxy learns what humans have always known. She raised her hand, still clasped with, toward the light she could not see. We are stronger together, not despite our differences, but because of them. That is the human lesson, and that is why humanity will change the galaxy forever. The assembly rose to their feet, applause echoing through the chamber like thunder. And beside the blind queen, a simple teacher from Earth smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest victories were won not with weapons, but with kindness.